In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Happy 2025, Taylor. How are you?
Woohoo! I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a beautiful December in January and so far January in Austin, but tonight's the first night where it's going to get freezing and
I saw that in my app because I have it on there and it's going to be cold tomorrow, right?
yeah, we're getting get into the 20s. I just finished wrapping up all the plants outside and
Oh
the
wow.
faucets and doing all that. So,
Wow. Wow. Um yeah, it's nice here. Well, I was in Puerto Rico for Christmas and New Year's and it was so hot and humid. Oh my God.
I'm
So
sure.
I'm happy to be someplace where it's like a little bit cold and dry.
Can you explain what the electricity situation was there?
Yes. So in well, let me introduce
Oh,
ourselves.
right.
Hello. Welcome to Doomed to Fail. We bring you history's most notorious disasters, epic failures, twice a week. I'm Taylor, joined by Fars, and we are back from our Christmas break. And yeah, no, the electric grid in Puerto Rico is not doing very well, essentially. Like the power went out twice while we were there. The first night it just went off in the middle of the night in San Juan, and then the second time on New Year's Eve it went off on the entire island.
Is it kind of like the situation with Texas where it just wasn't built for the scale that it's operating at?
I don't think so. I think it needs to be repaired and updated. I don't know if that's the same thing.
Yeah,
It's not
I
like
think
the
that's the same.
scale. It's like the just like it's old, you know?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was fine. A small blackout is always kind of fun. You know, you just like if it's one night, it's nice. You get to like light candles and you don't have to watch TV and you can just like chill out and like it's nice. And then like we went out to a bar and then the lights went on. Everybody was so excited and that's fun. Like a blackout for like that's good. But then like we also know people in different parts of Puerto Rico where during Hurricane Maria, they didn't have electricity for like 168 days.
Yeah, that's not
That is not fun.
not fun. My funnest memory from LA, well, one of my funnest memories from LA was when we had the blackout, remember? And we all went down to the Mexican restaurant.
Oh yeah, that was during the day at
It was
work.
during the day. Yeah, it was during the work day. And we're like, we never took off during the day. And we just took off.
hmm
We're like, let's just go have margaritas. It was fun.
When I worked in Glendale at the my next job, the Glendale grid is absolute shit, and it went down twice in the summer that I worked there, like 3 months. All the power went out twice. At one time, I was looking out the window. I was in a meeting, and I watched a electric pole explode, and then all the lights went out.
That's kind of freaky.
I was like, this place is garbage. I'm
I think I
just
saw
leaving
an
this place.
electric pole explode here at my house. Like I didn't actually see it, but I saw sparks flying out of this window.
Oh
But
my God,
behind this window is just like trees, so you can't really see anything. But I saw the sparks. I was like, that's probably dangerous.
it's probably bad. Yeah.
Not good.
Never
Um,
good. But
well,
no, but it was super fun and I had a great time and the kids had a great time and we're just adjusting to being back on this time zone, getting
on to
ready
the
for
new
life
year,
again.
which feels
Yeah.
like it's like I could have had 2 more weeks of this. We would have been fine.
Yeah. I don't really feel ready to like be like, oh, I'm thinking about my goals for 2025 yet,
I
you know.
know.
I'm
I
kind of
know.
like, I don't know, I just kind of rolled into this.
I
Maybe when
know.
I like go back to work and people want to like talk about stuff again, but like my husband shared something where, you know, you get back to work on Monday and you're like, I don't remember what I do, you know.
I did kind of, and this sounds really stupid. I did kind of try and work a little bit, like on a daily basis, just like I totally didn't forget what the motions of working were,
hmm
and so the punch in the face of a first full day back wasn't as hard.
Yeah.
So
No,
hopefully it
I
won't
brought my
be.
computer on vacation. I was like, you know, just in case something happens, and I didn't open it once. So proud of myself.
That was a good move.
Yeah.
Proud of
I
you for
was like,
that.
never mind. I did
Um,
it.
Sweet. So today we're going to do an episode that you have been researching and going to be presenting. So what are we diving into?
Cool. I know that you were like, if we don't have anything for this week, we don't have to do it. But I've been reading this book for like my whole life, it seems like. I read a really boring ass long book about this. So I was like, I can get this out of my brain so I can do something else. The topic isn't boring, but the book was very long and boring, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk about a disease that is almost 100% eradicated, but was a really, really big deal about 100 years ago.
Polio.
Polio. Yep. I read Polio, an American story, long and boring, but got the job done. I learned a lot about it. And I have some New York Times articles that I will share as well. Do you know anything about polio?
I know that the last human being to have to live in an iron lung because of polio just died, and he was
Yeah.
like a lawyer. He looked really rough. He was like in really rough shape. Um, he wrote with his mouth, like a pen in his mouth, and yeah, he looked like he had a really. I would have rather just been thrown into the ocean.
It's rough. There's a thing, I didn't write this down, but there is a thing where people who had polio are very successful. Not like everybody who lives in an iron lung is a lawyer, but like they tend to be more educated and more successful than their peers because they had to try harder,
Well,
to like get
yeah,
attention
what
and like
else
get
are you
help.
gonna do? You can't
Yeah.
do anything when you're in an iron lung.
Yeah. So, yeah, wild. So, let's talk about what polio is and what it does. FDR, of course, fundraising, and then vaccines about it. So, polio is called poliomyelitis. It is a virus, and most cases are totally asymptomatic, and it only happens in humans. So, you get it, you don't even notice, and you move on. There's three types of polio. You have to get each type separately to get the immunity to all three, but then you have the immunity to all three. And a lot of times you would never have any idea that you had it for most of history. It's been around forever. It will give you maybe a headache or a fever, like a little one. But if you start to feel that your neck hurts, you can't move your neck, you start to feel like your limbs are aching, maybe you can't move your legs, like that is the when it gets really, really bad, and it has gone probably to your brain stem, and that's what causes paralysis. But that is a very, very small percent. Like I said, it's like 1% of people who get it get that paralysis. And another thing is that they learned later is that it actually gets worse as you get older. So you can like live with what you have, but then it's going to get worse later. So it kind of always stays with you. And then a very, very small amount end in death, but not that many.
Paralysis is then like everything goes paralyzed.
Depends. It can be like your legs, it can be like your whole body. That's why you would need the iron lung. It can vary.
Did FDR have polio?
Maybe.
Okay.
So it's a poop disease. It has to do with getting dirty water in your mouth. So it's been around, like I said, forever. And for most of time, it's been endemic, which means everybody would get it one way or another. It's possible that there's an ancient Egyptian tablet that shows a carving, a drawing of someone who has it because they have like smaller legs for their body. And it was something that was just like always around, but no one knew what it was. And they probably were like, it's the mom's fault or a witch or something, for all of time. They, in the West, it was found as a disease in 1789 by a doctor named Michael Underwood, and the virus was identified in 1909 by a doctor named Carl Landsnyder. So very new that we even like knew that it was a virus, and also very new that we even knew that there are viruses. We didn't know about viruses until like 1916. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, kind of makes sense.
You just like didn't know why people were getting sick.
Yeah, I mean, it was in bacteria only like a little bit before that.
Yeah. After that, it was like, who the fuck knows?
That's why I'm like we are so lucky for the time that we live in when everybody's like, "Oh my God, it's the worst time ever." And it's like it is the best time ever. Like
Yes.
no human would have want to survive any other time but this time right now.
Yeah. It doesn't mean we can't criticize it and want better, but it does
But
mean,
but that's the thing. In the
yeah,
future, they're gonna look back and be like, "Can you believe these animals lived in 2025? Like,
absolutely.
how could
Yeah.
they survive?" It's
Yeah.
like,
Oh my God, how gross. But I feel grateful to have air conditioning and not have polio and to wash my hands.
even
It's
just
super
washing
good.
your hands feels so nice, doesn't it? Like,
It does. I mean, I enjoy being clean, and I feel like I'm gonna talk about it, but for a long time, people were not clean.
no, definitely not.
No. So, but it's interesting. So wait till I get to that part because it actually the cleanliness has to do with the polio. So every once in a while, someone ends up paralyzed, someone dies from this disease, no one knows what it is. And that's just the way it is for thousands of years of human time. Then, in the early 20th century, something interesting happens, especially in America. And this goes to what we were just saying, is that there's a ton of polio outbreaks, more than ever before. And there are towns that get totally overrun. So, like, you go to school, and then 2 weeks later, five of the kids in your class are dead and three of them are paralyzed. It just like is terrible. No one knows what to do. No one knows where it's coming from. There are towns that go into like complete lockdown. The town of Hickory, North Carolina, where my father-in-law works right now and goes there like every week to be a doctor, but they were called Polio City and they would send polio patients there because so many people there had it. And they're trying to figure out like what is going on. In some families, like all the kids die. Like 13 kids, 11 of them die. Just like terrible stories. And it's getting worse and worse, and no one can really figure out why. It's hitting middle and upper class neighborhoods more than poor neighborhoods, which is also confusing because they have this idea that you're getting sick because of dirt and germs and something like that is starting to be a thing. But they're like, why is this hitting the nicer neighborhoods and not the worst neighborhoods? If you were further away from the city, you are more likely to get it, which is weird because cities were gross,
Are you
right?
are you gonna answer
I
why?
am.
Okay.
Do you think you know why?
No, it's the poor and rich thing is incredibly confusing if it's a poop disease.
It's confusing, but I'll tell you why in 1 second. So in 1916, there was an outbreak where over 20,000 people died. The Roosevelt family, they had all five of their kids. FDR sent them out of New York to Campobello, which is their estate in Canada, with kind of their vacation home, to get out of it. In By 1949, there are like 40,000 cases a year, and it's growing. The 1949 summer was super hot, and it seemed to be getting worse. And it's not the worst thing statistically to happen to children. More children die from cancer, more children die from accidents than from polio during this time, but it's still alarming, and it's alarming when it comes because it comes fast, and people don't know. There's nothing you can do about it. There's no cure, you know?
Yeah.
So the build up to this is Americans being more focused on hygiene and healthcare. So our healthcare system now, like we just said, isn't great, but shit ton better than it used to be because it was nothing. It was like no one knows what a germ is. In Europe, people just starting to have like laboratories and like try to see things. It's all very, very new. Like a medical school was like, I don't know, hang out with this doctor for a week and learn how to read Latin, and you're a doctor. Like,
Weren't they also like barbers? Weren't barbers
yeah,
also
yeah,
doctors?
yeah. It was like, oh, this guy's gonna take this dirty razor and cut off your cyst,
Ugh.
whatever. Gross. So in the early 1900s, the Rockefellers started the first lab in the United States, but there was plenty you couldn't see. So polio is a virus called a filter virus because you couldn't see it with the first microscopes. It would go through the filter that they had, like it was too small to see. So you couldn't even see it. You couldn't see viruses until 1915. But the hygiene part is super interesting. It's a little bit about like consumerism and ads because like now, everyone's like, oh, take this for gut health, take this for this. There's always going to be someone who's like trying to get you to buy something to be healthy in like a million different ways. But in the early 1900s in the United States, they started to do things like sell Listerine. And they did that by telling people that they shouldn't have bad breath anymore, which I'm like 100% for that. That makes sense. But it was like these commercial companies that were in charge of like selling soap and selling things to get people to be cleaner. And then it had the public health benefits of people, washing their hands and putting up screens on their windows and picking up trash on the street, things like that. Just like, and that resolved a lot of problems. Another thing that they had was like DDT was being sprayed everywhere just to like eliminate the chances to see bugs and all of those things. So a lot of stuff was happening that was objectively good. People are getting cleaner. But the problem is, and this is the middle class versus city thing. If you don't get exposed to polio when you are a baby, when you can develop the immunity and you get it later, it's going to be worse. Does that make sense? So that was the problem, is that in cities and like places that were less clean, you would be exposed to it really early on, and it was usually nothing. Nothing would happen. You get immune. You wouldn't even know it had happened. But then all of a sudden, there's places where everything is disinfected, so you're not going to get polio when you're a kid. So you're going to get it if you get exposed to it later, it's much, much worse. So that's why if someone comes into the town, you're like little 1950s American town with polio. That's why a lot of the kids are going to get it all of a sudden.
Is that also the logic behind chicken pox that like you need to get it young so that it's not as bad if you get it
Yeah,
older? Because if you get it late, it's like shingles, isn't it?
yeah,
Which
hmm
is really bad apparently.
yeah. Yeah, it's supposed to be awful. So yeah, kind of like that. So the younger you are, the better if you get it. So the people aren't getting it anymore, and that's why it's hitting those nicer neighborhoods.
Got it.
Um, they also, and, they also would blame immigrants, of course. Blaming like the Italians for bringing it over, and
So
they
wait,
for a
this was
long
what, 1900s?
yeah, like this is like 1940.
Wait, Italians weren't white in the 1940s?
I know that was my point. I know it
Interesting.
doesn't. Just hating the immigrant. Who cares where they come from? So they would like blame them, and then they also said that like it didn't hurt African American kids. Like they weren't getting it when like the reality is that they lived in worse neighborhoods because of America and they would get it early and then they didn't have the same problem. And then also there's not a lot of data about those neighborhoods anyway. So that's probably, I mean, that's not true, obviously, you know.
Do we know
S-
that though? Because isn't it like there's some diseases that are racially
There
like
are, but polio is not one of them.
okay,
Yeah, yeah. Polio just hits humans and it hits them the same, regardless of anything else.
got it.
So if you do get polio and you need help and you do become paralyzed, a lot of people would be wearing leg braces, like FDR, have like a cane, have crutches, have like the little crutches on your arms. Some therapies help a little bit, like hydrotherapy and massage to try to like get your muscles moving again, but there's no cure. You really can't come back from it. There's things where like, you can get one shoe that has a little bit of a heel, so you don't have much of a limp, but you'll always have like a little bit of paralysis and a limp if you have it.
Yeah, didn't Forrest Gump have it?
I don't think so. Because is not a real person and he was okay afterwards, so he couldn't have had polio.
He could have been real. We don't know that he wasn't.
Okay, I don't know. We can look it up later. So the iron lung that you said, do you know what the iron lung does?
It breathes for you because I assume that your diaphragm is paralyzed.
Yeah, exactly. So it is called a it's a negative ventilator. So you like lay in it and it sucks the air out so your body like contracts and then it puts air in and your body expands. So it like breathes for you by moving your body. And then the opposite of that is a positive ventilator, which are like the ones that we know about. Like when someone's on a ventilator because of COVID, it's a positive ventilator where they're putting air into you and like pushing it out from inside of you rather than like pulling it away from you out from the outside. But it's the same idea to breathe
Yeah,
for you.
makes sense.
Make sense? So now it's the 1920s, and polio again isn't the most important thing, but it is scary. And FDR has just lost the election for vice president of the United States. So he was like on that ticket. They lost. He's trying to figure out what to do next. And he goes to a Boy Scout camp, and there's a picture of him standing at the Boy Scout camp, and like he looks like everything is fine. That's the last photo of him standing. This is in 1921. He goes to Campobello, which is the Roosevelt's house in Canada, and there's this show that was about first ladies that was on Showtime, and I watched the first episode and I was like, this is stupid. But they like were so exact on like all of the stereotypes. Like Betty Ford was like constantly drinking, and Michelle Obama was weird. And then the Eleanor one, they had Eleanor and Louis Howe, who was one of their advisors, playing golf on the front lawn, and like FDR comes in and he's like drinking a beer and like he's in his pajamas and he's like, "Oh, I feel so strong," whatever. The story is that like FDR spent all day with the kids. They went out on boats. They had a great time. He got back home. They wanted to do this race, which is like, those families that are like very active.
Yeah, it's
They're-
the Kennedy types.
Yeah. So he's like, oh, they're doing this race. So the race was like a 2 mile run and then a swim and then a swim back and then another 2 mile run. So he does that race with his kids and he comes back and he's wearing his bathing suit and his bathing suit's wet and he sits in the house for a little bit, checking his mail in his wet bathing suit and he doesn't feel well. and then he goes to bed early, and the next day his legs can't move. So the question then is like, what did he have? He was 39 years old, and people think that he has polio, right? And a couple things here, like there's stuff recently that says it could be Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is like another thing, but it doesn't really matter because the work he did was for the charity for polio. So like that's who cares now what he really had, you know? Like I don't. But if he had polio, the reason that he could have gotten polio is because of his isolation. Because when he was a kid, his mother was like, "You are my precious gift to the world, baby, and you will not be around other people." So he lived the super isolated life. And then when he went to like college as a teen, he got every disease because he had never been around people before,
Let me ask
you
you, as a
know?
mother, can you? I've been thinking about this a lot for various reasons, but as a mom, like, can you understand it in an intellectual level, like why some parents become that way? That I must protect you at all costs for everything. You know, it's funny.
Yeah.
I have cousins. I have a cousin who they're she's married to a guy and they're both like surgeons, and they came over to my parents' house with one of their babies, and well, not a baby, I guess like a toddler or something. The toddler wanted like an apple. The toddler holds the apple as it's cut in half and drops it on the ground on the carpet, and
Hmm.
then the dad just picks it up, rubs it on his leg, and gives it back to the kid. It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, like he needs to get sick. Like that this is life. He has to like
Whatever. Yeah.
I'm not gonna seal him in a vacuum seal, but like, what is it about those kinds of parents that do that? I've never been able to like understand it.
I feel like it's a little bit of like disinformation and wanting to control things. So like my father-in-law is a doctor and you could like have your leg falling off and he'd be like, "You're fine." You know, like he's not he's not he's exactly like that. Like a doctor will be like, "Who cares? Like you're fine. Like you're not dying. Are you dying? No, you're fine." And I think people who like don't know what's going on, like he's told us that he has like, you know, there are people who want to control every aspect of their child's life, and that there's it's just like not good for them at all. But I think that they need to control something. Maybe something else in their life isn't working, you know, and they have to control something. Like Sarah Roosevelt was like, all she had was FDR. You know, like her husband died, she just had this boy, and she had all this money. She had nothing but time and money, so she was like just dedicated her life to FDR. Like when FDR and ER got married, Sarah was like, "Oh, I bought you guys an apartment." And they're like, "Oh my God, thank you." And then they were like, "Look, this apartment has a door in it that goes directly to my apartment. It's the same house. Surprise." Like, she's crazy, you know? But she
So
also raised a
fascinating.
president. So you either raise a president or a serial killer. Those are your options.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. But but that could be why he like that could be why he got it. The doctor came to see him, you know, on that first day, and just as a side note, the doctor sent him a bill of $600, and they were like, "That feels harsh because in today's money, that's like $10,000." But no one had insurance. You didn't have that until FGR made that, you know.
I
So
didn't know that. I didn't know FDR was the one who did that.
he was one of the people who like made it like a big like you had to have it like with your job, and he made Medicare and he made Social Security and like all those things to help people.
Yeah, he's kind of a
You
pretty
know.
good president, huh?
Yeah, they did a couple good things. On September 16th, 1921, on the cover of the New York Times, there's no pictures on the cover, but it has a bunch of little stories on it. But the headline is F.D. Roosevelt ill of poliomyelitis. Brought on special car from Campobello, Bay of Fundy to hospital here. Recovering, doctor says. Patient stricken by infantile paralysis a month ago and use of legs affected. So initially it was called infantile paralysis because you mostly got it when you were young, probably because of that like immunity you have when you're a kid, or you like isn't as bad as when you're a kid. So FDR does things like he buys a big part of land in Georgia, in Warm Springs, Georgia, where they have like these natural pools. That's supposed to help. It doesn't really help, but it makes you feel better. You know, those things feel nice and you're
Yeah,
floating.
if we can all afford to buy a hot springs for our
Yeah,
backyard, we'd probably do it.
yeah. So it feels better. He gets a little bit of massage that can help him maybe feel better. We also know this is where Eleanor Roosevelt really gets her stride because people are like, "We need you to run for governor. We need you to be president." And ER has to go out and like attend a lot of events to keep his name in people's minds and like really like be the person for the family. But it was very hard for him, obviously. Like he was a father of five, big personality, all these things, and all of a sudden he can't walk. So he spent a lot of time in wheelchairs. When he was held up by braces or by people, it was hard for him. They would do things like stand him against a railing or walk him to a podium, and it was a lot of effort for him to move his legs at all. He when he when he was working with the Warm Springs, he worked with his law partner, Basil O'Connor, to start a Warm Springs Foundation to help people who had polio. Into his presidency, they changed it in 1938 to the National Foundation for Infant Paralysis. And they're about to change the way philanthropy works, sort of like forever for the world. So the depression is kind of in here, and that's going to make it a little bit different. But they're going to start with like small dollar donations and things that people didn't do before. Like there used to literally be a community chest, which I thought was only a Monopoly. The community chest.
Yes.
Well, you would literally just like donate to the community, and then someone would be in charge of allocating that money. So you'd be like, I'm going to donate this money to this area, and they'd be like, okay, well, we need it in the schools today, and we need it for something else tomorrow. And someone like a committee would allocate it. But this was like donating to a very specific cause for a very specific reason. So it starts with these huge birthday parties for FDR, and I'm laughing because do you remember when you were in charge of making all those parties across the country?
Yeah, that did not go well.
There was like a book launch that Fars and I were around, and they were like, Fars, why don't you why don't you have book reading parties all across the country? And you were like, okay. And then I don't know how many you scheduled, but it
Very
was not,
few.
yeah, it was not like 30,000 like they did for, or like thousands they did for FDR. But they had huge birthday parties for him. They raised a ton of money. His birthday's at the end of January. And they don't do a lot of research, but they do help people. There are some like racial tensions, but they don't help like everybody as in places like Warm Springs in Georgia, where it's a lot more segregated than in other places. But the main thing that the foundation does is pay medical bills for people who have polio, regardless of their income status. So it's sort of a pay as much as you can system, but they want everybody to have the same amount of care, and they will spend in the years that is that polio is their focus, they're going to spend like $230 million helping people get health care. So super good. They did a lot of really good stuff. Not a ton of research yet, but they do a lot of that, the healthcare. So now there's a need to expand the Foundation for Infant Paralysis. They want to raise more money, and an actor named Eddie Cantor suggests the March of Dimes. Have you heard of the March of
Yeah.
Dimes? So it was kind of a play on a radio show called The March of Time, which was like a weekly show that would tell you what was going on in the world. And they were like, everybody, if you everyone mailed a dime, or every kid mailed a dime to the White House, like we'd raise so much money. So once they made the first ask, it was like pandemonium at the White House. They got like hundreds and thousands of letters that had a dime in them, or a quarter, or a check, or a dollar, or all these things. And they just got like, they raised so much money with the March of Dimes. It was really, really incredible. After Roosevelt passes away in 1946, on what would have been his 64th birthday, the Roosevelt dime was issued. And that's why he's on every dime these days.
I actually did not know that.
Yeah. Before that, it was like, I looked it up, it was like an eagle or something, but now it's FDR forever
Cool.
because of this. So so that turned the foundation to the March of Dimes. The March of Dimes had like 30 local chapters. They did a lot of like really interesting marketing where they made it like a mother's issue. And they were like, for mothers, like you're the ones who are going to need to protect your children. So they would do these mothers marches that are really cool. So they would say like, spend a lot of time prepping. They'd send them everything they needed. They'd say, go on your local radio shows, like, put out flyers, tell your friends. And on FDR's birthday at the end of January, in your neighborhood, anyone who wants to donate money can leave the porch light on. And if they don't want to donate money, they can leave it off, and you'll walk past their house and no one will be embarrassed. It won't be weird. Just every house with the porch light on, knock on the door, and they'll be ready with money. And it worked. And they raised a ton of money that way too.
Just be so much easier to deal with.
Isn't that cool? There was one cute story where there's a house where all the lights were off except the porch light, and they knocked on the door and they were like kind of nervous, and an old blind woman answered, and she was like, "Here's your money," because she didn't need
She
the
was
lights on,
blind.
she was blind, but
Yeah.
she knew the porch light was going to be on. So super cool, and it made philanthropy and it made giving something everybody could do. Like before this, like you didn't think about, I'm going to give a dime to a organization that's going to make a big global impact. But now you
Right.
could. Another thing they did is the movies. So in the movie theater, they would ask for money and they made a shit ton of money that way too. They would have like a little thing and ask for money. And I think that they've done that recently as well. They like ask for money in the movie theater. There was a movie, like a short film that played before the movies that would talk about the March of Dimes and get people to donate. And one of the first ones starred a very young Nancy Reagan when she was an actress in
I don't know. She was an
Hollywood.
actress.
Yeah. So I think I said this before, but from 1938 through the approval of the vaccine in 1955, the foundation spent $233 million on patient care. So more than 80% of the polio patients in the United States received aid from the March of Dimes.
When did we get a vaccine?
1955.
How long was that from when 1917 is when they knew it was a virus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So nearly 40 years.
Yeah. So there are two types of polio vaccines. One is live, has like a live version of the virus, and one is inactive. It has a killed version of the virus. COVID vaccine, for example, is an inactive vaccine. It has the killed version, not a live version of COVID. There are two different men who made them. The one you know is Jonas Salk. You've heard that one, right?
No.
No.
Why would I have
Okay.
known that?
I don't know. I thought everybody knew that. Jonas Salk is the doctor who made the live vaccine, and Albert Sabin is the one who made the kill vaccine. Nope, opposite. Salk made the kill one. Sabin made the live one. So Jonas Salk was born October 28th, 1914 in New York. His parents were immigrants and he was the first person in his family to like really receive an education. He was Jewish, which is a big deal because it was hard to get into college. Schools had very clear limits on the number of Jewish people they would allow in. For example, Yale in 1935 had 501 applicants. 76 people were accepted and only five got in. So basically, 40% of the people who applied to Yale in 1935 were Jewish, and only 7% of the class that got in was Jewish. So like they were like, you can't have more than that many Jewish people in this class because of racism. I don't know. So he went to CCNY, then NYU for medical school, and he worked on the flu virus. And he worked in Pittsburgh, and he had a list of things that he wanted to work on. And he probably was just like, I'm going to work on polio because I'm going to get a lot of money from the March of Dimes for this. And he did. He got a lot of like money for research, which is fine because that's what you need, right?
So he did, sorry, he did get into Yale?
No, he didn't. But that was just an example of like he went to NYU, but just
Oh,
like the
okay.
example of like the how hard it was to get into medical school if you were Jewish.
Okay, so he was like the best of the best of the best of the best because he was okay, got it.
Like he didn't his he like wasn't like his regular school grades were like okay, but when he started doing like lab work, that's where he really excelled, and they were like, this is where we need him, that kind of thing.
Yeah, by the way, I think that should be how everything works. Like I don't get the whole you need to be amazing at everything. It's like
Yeah,
just the thing that you have natural aptitude towards, like grade that. Like why do you care how good somebody is? It's stuff they don't care about.
totally. Like I'm
Anyways,
never gonna be able to climb a rope, but I can read.
why do we spend so much time learning geometry? Like how frequently have I had to use
No,
geometry in
we
life?
while we were in Puerto Rico, our cousin's son, he's like 13, he had geometry homework, and everybody was mad because they were like, that you're taking away from our vacation to do this geometry homework. Can't believe that your teacher gave you homework, blah, blah, blah. But then we were on a boat, and I feel like we use geometry constantly to not hit other boats. Because you're like looking at another boat, and you're like, I'm gonna go this way.
I don't know if knowing the formulas
I
help you
mean,
there.
I hated like having to like do the proofs. Those were the worst.
The whole thing, like all of it, like was the whole point like you gotta know the math stuff because you can't have a calculator with you at all times. Like
Yeah, that's stupid. I know we
it
do.
was so much of the stuff we learned, Taylor, was so pointless. Cursive, I know you love cursive. What
I
a
love
waste of
cursive.
time. We took classes on how to type. It's like that's all we do. Like, why do we have to take a class on that? Anyways, whatever.
Well, we had to learn how to type.
I mean, I guess, but like, when we've just at this point, well, maybe we wouldn't have gone into the careers we went into if we didn't know how to type.
I can't imagine how hard my life would be if I didn't know how to type, but I also probably could have figured it out.
That's what I'm getting at. Did you
Yeah,
need
yeah.
a whole semester?
I don't think I took a whole semester in typing. It wasn't like 1964 where I was like going to be a secretary, even though I was a secretary
Oh,
for like a decade.
no, in high school? Yeah. Like, was it high school? Yeah, I guess it would have been high school. No, in like freshman year of high school, yeah, we had one full semester that was like,
Following that turtle around the screen. The turtle?
or you'd have the blocks fall and
Yeah,
you'd have to
yeah.
hit the letter before it hit the ground.
I'm always pretty impressed that I can do it without looking. I couldn't tell you where the letters are, but I know where they are.
Yeah, same page.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. Anyway, yes, I agree. And Jonas Salk was really good at lab work. That was where he excelled. That's where he's going to be a hero. Some things that are some facts about this kill virus vaccine. An absolute insane amount of monkeys were killed to do this. Like
I don't like that.
insane. So just FYI.
I would have much rather the humans died.
Um, his vaccine is three shots, one for each type of polio, because there are three different types of polio. There were questions with the testing that he did. A lot of it, I think, is like of the time, and a lot of it is like, yeah, I don't know. Because like some people wanted to do like half placebo, half the real polio shot. But he was like, how can I give these kids a fake shot and then maybe they get polio later? You know, like that would be unfair. And they were like willing to risk themselves on this vaccine anyway, on this trial. Then he also did some trials in places like the D.T. Watson Home for Crippled Children and the Polk State School for the R word and feeble-minded. So that's not great
What, did it
because
was
those
named
people
that?
know that those people couldn't really consent, you know?
Oh, he was doing testing on them. Okay.
Yeah. Like testing the vaccine. In the end, almost 2 million children were involved in the trials, and it worked. It did stop people from getting polio. It did help eradicate the major outbreaks. And in 1955, it was approved. There were some issues with how he shared the recipe, so it had to be very, very specific. And so he would kind of change it every once in a while, and there was opportunity for error. And another something that I thought you might have heard is he went on like the radio or TV or something, and they said, "Who owns this vaccine?" And he said, quote, "Well, the people, I would say. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?" Which is like the whole point where he didn't make any money off of this, besides
Yeah,
his like
I did
salary.
know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that brought up a whole thing because people were afraid of socialized medicine, of course, because they were like, but if it's for free from the government, who's going to pay the doctors? You know, like, why can't you should have to go to the doctor and pay three copays to get these three shots and all these things. But eventually the government was like, we're going to give this to the children. And they started doing it. Um, in 1955, a batch from Cutter Labs, which is a lab in California that was making the vaccine, killed 11 children because they made it wrong. So that made the testing and the just quality control a lot higher for the vaccine. Some people were upset with Salk because he never thanked them. So he kind of like let himself be like, oh, I'm just a humble lab doctor, but also carefully curated his own image. A lot of the photos of him were like in pristine labs and they were all set up before he got there. It wasn't like him actually working. And he never won a Nobel Prize, but he did win a bunch of other awards. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter, RIP, gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The same year, he also gave it to Martin Luther King Jr. So um, he also,
I'd rather have the millions. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say you can keep the award. I'd rather have the millions.
well, there were also things that like, I mean, he got plenty of money. You know, like he had like fellowships that gave him money. Like one senator was like, we should pay him $10,000 a year until he dies for all the help that he did to America's children. Like that didn't go anywhere, but people were like, we're going to continue to give this man money because they were excited. And he also like wrote books and was famous and like he was fine. But yes. So, just another a little bit about his life. He was married to Donna Lindsay until their divorce in 1968. They had three sons. In 1970, he married artist Francois Guillot, and she was a French artist who had two kids with Picasso. So that's weird. She met
That's a
Picasso when
flex.
she, yeah, but she met Picasso when she was 21 and he was 61, which feels
Ugh.
like gross. Like Dr. Seuss's widow, she managed the Salk Institute for Research until her death in 2023 at age 101. Salk himself died earlier, of course, on June 23rd, 1995, at the age of 80 in La Jolla, California, which is where he did a lot of his research. And again, gorgeous. Makes sense.
Gorgeous.
Nowhere near there. So his was the kill vaccine. The live vaccine was made by Albert Sabin. He also had March of Dimes money. He was born in a part of Russia that is now Poland on August 26, 1906, and he was a different kind of researcher, a different kind of doctor, and he really wanted the live vaccine. He thought that a live vaccine was the only one that could completely eradicate polio. He was one of the first people to see that polio could be grown in other tissue besides like brain tissue because they were doing things like injecting polio into the brains of monkeys and trying to see what would happen. But he found it could grow in other tissue and they were able to study it more, kind of like with the Henrietta Lacks stuff, where like you have the tissue cultures that you can study outside of a body. And
Yeah,
that was helpful for like make research go quicker and save animals. So that's a good thing.
which I like.
Yeah. His vaccine is the oral one. So it's the one that you either it's like drops or you like eat it on a sugar cube. And he was mad because the United States was like, we're fine. We have this other one. We're not going to, we don't need this one. So he went to the USSR and his vaccine between 1955 and 1961 was tested slash given to at least 100 million people in the USSR, Eastern Europe, Singapore, Mexico, and the Netherlands. So it was given to people all over the world and it worked as well. The problem is that with a live vaccine, you can get polio from it. There is a chance of something called reversion to virulence, where the little tiny bit of live polio in the vaccine becomes big, becomes back to being something that can kill you. So people did get polio from it. So it's not perfect, but it was something that was easier to produce and easier to administer. So they used it for a very, very, very long time in the United States. They switched from the Salk vaccine to the Sabin vaccine in the 60s, and that's when they used for a really long time. He got his Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1986, among many, many other awards. He also did not get a Nobel Prize. Both Sabin and Salk are in the Polio Hall of Fame in Warm Springs, Georgia, which still exists as a place to have like FDR history. So, like I said, for a long time, the live virus one was the one that was given. Most of the world's kids are vaccinated. Me, you, we took the live polio vaccine orally. They switched back to the dead one in 2000. So in 2000, they switched back to Salk's vaccine because by the late 1990s, almost all the polio in the United States was from the live vaccine. Does that make sense?
Taylor, so we got injected. So we have polio.
We had the live vaccine, which gives us like that tiny bit of polio that makes you immune to it.
You're immune to it because your body retains it.
Yeah, like once you get it, your body learns how to fight it and then keeps that memory forever.
Interesting.
Like yes, we got the live polio vaccine, and the problem was now the only way people were getting it was from the vaccine. It was no longer something that was
Hold
like
on. So
out that you
me
could
and you
get.
could have gotten real polio because of
Yes.
this?
hmm The chances were like almost zero, but they were there.
But you just said they brought back the kill one because the people were getting real polio.
Yeah, they did, and they did. That
When?
the chances were there, and that's why they brought back the kill one because they were like, now we've eradicated it. There's no natural cases of polio anymore. The only ones are from the vaccine because
That's
everybody
crazy.
was immune to it, so it did the thing. So polio is eliminated in the United States, in the Americas since 1994, which is like North North America, South America, Europe, Western Pacific, Asia, all polio free by the World Health Organization, which means there have been no wild polio viruses for the last at least 3 years, like in a row. So you can't just like get it out in the wild. The only two countries where polio is endemic and you can, if you're not vaccinated, actually like kind of get it naturally are Afghanistan and Pakistan. And that has to do with like misinformation and like their war zones, you know? So
Yeah.
that makes it hard. Another misinformation example is in 2003 in Nigeria, a warlord said that the people who were giving the polio shots were sterilizing kids, which is obviously not true, and so polio reappeared. In 2013, 9 workers who were giving polio vaccinations were murdered in Kano, Nigeria, by like vigilantes who thought they were hurting children. And polio survivors and religious leaders got them back on track and were told the people that rumor was not true and that the vaccine was safe. And Africa has been polio free since 2020. So it worked.
Sweet. I'm glad it worked
Me
because
too.
that is terrifying. Like I said, like in that situation when you got like the iron lung guy, like I mean, you know, God, like what? Like,
Like what a life. Yeah.
yeah, you gotta like at some point, it's like quality of life has to count for something, you know?
Hmm. I know.
And if I was in that position, I don't know. I don't think I would. d- Go, I
I
wouldn't
don't
go
know.
through
Yeah,
with it.
it's hard. So the March of Dimes continues to be an organization. It helps with babies worldwide. They help with measles and rubella, neonatal care. They were really big in promoting folic acid, which is like a vitamin that you take when you're pregnant. And they, found that that was really helpful to pregnancies and to babies. And so they were part of that big campaign. The problem right now is the polio vaccine is sort of a victim of your own success kind of thing. And I was thinking about it like, why am I paying Terminex so much money to come to my house every month? I don't have any bugs. When like the reason I don't have any bugs is because I pay Terminex so much money every month.
That's actually what I was going to ask you was, do we even, if it's been eradicated, do we even need?
We do. Yeah. Because it's not like it's gone from like the world. Like it could exist. We just don't get it anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like still out there. So there's also like misinformation. Obviously, like RFK said that it caused cancer. It does not. At one point, someone suggested that it was the reason that we have HIV and AIDS because of the monkey testing, that brought it over into like human laboratories, which is also not true. Um, but it works, and we know that it works because there's no polio. So we have to keep doing it, like having the bug guy come over, but people won't get polio anymore.
My bug
You
guy's
know,
coming over tomorrow, actually. How
I love
many
my bug lady. She bought
vaccines,
cookies from us.
how many, like for your kids, like how many vaccines do they get?
I don't know, a lot. They get a lot when they're babies. Um, I mean, the worst part, honestly, is that they put a grown-up size Band-Aid on their legs, and their legs are like the size of your like wrist. So like their little chunky little baby thigh has this huge ass Band-Aid on it, and you have to rip it off, and it's so sad.
Whenever I just took Luna to get her annual checkup, and this is where I'm like not totally on the vaccine train, is where they're like, yeah, we're gonna administer like 4 vaccines to her, and I'm like, no, like her body like, it
No, I'm
can't
opposite. And
be
get it over. No,
good.
no, it's fine. Get it over with. They don't interact with each other. They're different things.
I know, but it's
I'd
like
rather
you're
not
putting
take
so
my
much
kids
shit
four
in like a
separate times to get shots.
but
It doesn't matter.
you're changing the body chemistry so many times.
But they don't interact with each other. It's different. I mean, I'm okay with it. You can do whatever you want to do. But I think you
Yeah.
should do it all the time. Um, and that is my story.
I never knew my parents injected me with live polio. Like
You
I
probably you
should
drank
have a
it.
word with them
Yeah.
about
No, you
this.
you you drank it. It was a little thing in your mouth, and that's it. You didn't have polio anymore. Um,
Yeah.
I also, for this episode, recorded a bonus episode with my dad. And we recorded this morning, and I will publish that as a separate thing because my dad remembers the day that you stood in line and got the polio vaccine in the sugar cube and then no one had to worry about it anymore.
That's
So we talked about
incredible.
it. Yeah. So it's fun. He told me about waiting in line, getting the sugar cube. My grandma brought their birth certificates, wrote it down in a notebook. You'll hear it. I'll post it.
You also
It's fun.
realizes like how prevalent FDR is, and like at first I thought how prevalent he is or his family is in our stories,
Hmm.
and and then I was like, actually, he's kind of like that in every story because he was president at the most consequential time in human history.
I know. Can you
Like,
believe it?
what
What a
was like
time.
the Great Depression, World
The
War
World War II.
II,
Christ.
polio, just, like every like huge thing
Yeah.
he was a part of.
And I also think it ties so into the thing that we say all the time about how dynasties are so difficult because like there aren't any Roosevelt kids now. Like none of them are close to being president because you always end up with kids who like can't do it. So it's like he was just like an outlier. Like his family was rich, but he was like exceptional.
Yeah, that's kind of I think that's just how it is with every.
Yeah, I think so
Can you
too.
imagine like I I shouldn't talk shit about someone so young, but I have thought about like Barron Trump, and it's like, how do you not become
Actual like monster.
it's got to be impossible. Like you were
Impossible.
raised as royalty from like birth. Like it's
Hmm.
yeah. Like first like
Impossible.
wealth royalty, and then actual like basically like real like royalty. It can't produce a good human. Like I don't know. Maybe again the kid's like fucking 18 years old. I shouldn't talk shit about him, but still.
No, you're
I
right.
still know how you
You're
can
not
be
wrong.
normal in that
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, ridiculous. Um, cool. Well, that's all I have, and I have to go because we're going to the movies.
What are you saying?
Sonic 3.
This should be fun.
It should be fun. The first two are great.
You should
So,
let your kids know I was a huge Sonic fan on Sega Genesis. Sega
oh, best.
Genesis was,
Hmm.
oh yeah, you can probably
They
buy
have
those
it
for like $15.
at the dentist we go to with them. They have like an old arcade game that has the
So
Sonic
fun.
2 on it. It's so fun.
That was the best game. That was the best. That was
Yeah.
you bought a Sega Genesis. You bought for Sonic. You bought N64 for GoldenEye. That was
Yep.
the rules.
That was it.
So, okay, cool.
Since
Well, thanks for sharing. Go
yeah,
enjoy the film,
thank you.
and I'll yeah, we'll go ahead and well, whatever, we can do our check-ins after this. But anyways,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing.
Thank you, everyone. Please tell your friends. We are trying to figure out how to grow in 2025. So Fars aren't going to have meetings about it. But tell your friends.
Tell your friends. We'd appreciate it.
Doomed to Fall Apart on all the social medias.
Sweet.
Cool.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.